All right, folks, rainy Monday afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. This is going to be a brief video here, less than 15 minutes. Having a little difficulty with the YouTube live part of the world. Not sure if it's the tablet I've got from school or if there's something to do with the YouTube people. YouTube doesn't want anyone going live from their phones unless they have 1,000 subscribers. They made that change because of the coronavirus. Thank you very much, coronavirus, for messing with YouTube. Nice. Okay. So here's where we are. On the study guide, ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves on the third page. Okay, if you were with us in class on Monday, we talked about the material here. Okay, I'm going to upload the PowerPoint, the entire thing, to Google Classroom. Okay, but I've got some slides here that I'm looking off of. So my idea is that the way we need to work this is that I'll go through and I'll talk like I would in class, and then I'll probably make some dumb joke, and then maybe you could laugh if you want to. You're at home. Now you're not in class. No one's going to judge you if you laugh at the joke, or if you don't laugh at the joke for that matter. And then you can write down the material on here, and we can move along. So what are we aiming for here? At the end of this, we are going to have an assessment like we would have normally. So please make sure we're learning the material as we go. I realize this is not in class, but we're going to try and make it as best as possible. Okay. We left off the other day talking about the Treaty of Versailles, and the Treaty of Versailles is a horrendous piece of diplomacy in the sense that it really advantages Britain, France, the United States, you could also say Italy as well, and it really disadvantages the Germans. The Germans are blamed for World War I. Now, there are things that the Germans did that might have caused World War I, but by the same token, they're not the only people. Serbia, Austria-Hungary, you could even say countries like Russia, France, maybe even Britain had too much of an empire, and maybe they should have shared more. Perhaps you want to argue that way, but the Germans are the one who saddle all of the blame. And as a result of it, we get these horrendous terms from the Treaty of Versailles, right? I'm not going to try and make that the right way. You can see that image there, and you can go on Google Classroom, have a look at the PowerPoint, and it'll show it for you. Okay, at least that's my plan. If that falls apart, then we'll make amends. But I think I can make that happen. On the next slide here, there's a couple of images that are meant to be symbolic of what's going on with the Treaty of Versailles. And one of them, you've got the three members of the Treaty of Versailles team that are the big players, the Britain, France, and United States members. And then Germany is walking off to the guillotine with their hands tied behind their back going to their death. And symbolically, you can see Woodrow Wilson. He's the guy on the left in the picture here. I kind of bring it in here. Woodrow Wilson's this guy right there. He's got his hands like, what are we doing? This isn't a smart idea. We shouldn't just simply destroy this country like this. We should have a more peaceful and just way of dealing with World War I. You remember that's Wilson's tack. Now, the other one shows the world kind of with its hands around the throat of Germany. It's a sweet-looking map of Germany made into like an industrial worker with the throat right around it there. Okay. The next question on our study guide says, give examples of the empires that were ended at Versailles and the democratic successor states. So 2 parts. Empires that die. Some of the empires are destroyed by the fighting of World War I. Austro-Hungarian Empire loses itself because of the ravaging of World War I. Okay, Russia is a special case. Talk about the Russians here in a moment. But Germany's going to lose its empire in the sense that it loses some of its territory in Europe, Alsace-Lorraine, but really loses its empire because it loses the larger worldwide scope. It loses those African territories and also its Pacific territories. So it no longer is an empire. Now the Ottoman Empire is going to crumble as well. And in its place come these things that we call democratic successor states. Big point here, big point. At the heart of the Treaty of Versailles is the notion of self-determination, the idea that people have the right to rule themselves. And therefore, we shouldn't have an Austro-Hungarian Empire that rules over Austrians, Hungarians, Serbians, Bosnians, Herzegovinians, people like that. No, no, no. We should have an Austria, and that's what we're going to have. And we're going to have a Hungary, and that's what we're going to have. And then we should also have a Slavic state. Serbia basically is going to get a supersized state called Yugoslavia, right? I've got a map here the secondary map here. If you look at this map down here, if you look closely with me, maybe you've got the slides printed, there's new countries like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia. Those are the democratic successor states. Let's take the word apart. Democratic. The Treaty of Versailles is going to declare that these countries become democracy. Now that's a little bit iffy, and I say it's iffy because they aren't naturally democratic. These are not a group of people who in their entire existence on our screen have been democracies. They do not have the democratic traditions of the West, like a Britain or a France or even the United States on the other side of the pond. They're used to monarchy. So suddenly you're going to saddle them with a very different type of government, like a democracy. Okay, and that's going to be the case for places like Poland and Hungary and Yugoslavia and Austria. And that's all fine and good. And maybe that would have gone really well. But in the 1920s, we're going to run into a lot of political problems and an economic nightmare in the Great Depression. And countries like these new democratic successor states are not going to have the chops, the skills, the kind of resources to deal with that sort of a problem. Now, who's supposed to guide them through there? Britain and France. Britain and France are supposed to be the leading lights who are going to pick up the mantle and make these countries that are baby democracies into being great democracies. And unfortunately, that just isn't going to happen. Why? Because they're really busy dealing with their own problems with the Great Depression and their own internal strife. So I look at these countries, and if you'll notice, they're all kind of all in the same neck of the woods. They're right over in here, in that eastern part of Europe. And you think, well, it'll all be fine. Not really. Because along comes Hitler here in a little while, and Hitler's going to be able to say, you know, those countries that are democratic countries, maybe democracy doesn't work for you. Maybe you could solve your problems better with totalitarianism. Maybe if one person were in control, the right person, that is to say, the person I am, and I will take over the country and we will be one and I will make all of the decisions. And that totalitarian message is going to work well in the time of crisis, right? Sometimes we think of democracy as the perfect form of government, but we've got to divorce ourselves from that idea because sometimes democracy isn't the best form of government in some people's eyes. We're going to look at these people in the 1920s and 30s and they're going to think, maybe it would be better if we had a government where one person made the decisions. Okay, look at the crisis we're dealing at right now. Sometimes leaving it up to a popular democratic vote isn't best. Sometimes what's best is one person from above saying, this is what we're doing in this crisis. And that's going to be the problem for those democratic successor states. All right, we're flowing on down here. Now, big break. Because the next question says, name ways that World War I exacerbated. Exacerbated means worsened, made bigger, made more acute, the problems that already existed in Russia. Now, before we go any further on my study guide over here, I want to look back at my picture here. Okay, there's the Russian royal family. There they are. Now, in the Russian royal family, the Tsar, Nicholas II. Nicholas II, not the brightest bulb you've ever come across. His wife, Alexandra, a German. Oh, what? A German. We're at war with Germany and Russia. That's trouble. That's trouble. Keep in mind, that's trouble. You've got here a German woman married to a Russian man. Now, maybe in times of peace, no one bothers it. But in a war where we are suddenly fighting against the Germans, she looks like she might be a little bit of a problem for us. Now, around them, their daughters and their lone son. The most important person in this photo for us is the one, when you're looking at the photo, second from the right. That's Crown Prince Alexei. That's the future Romanov Tsar. That kid is the potential future of a 300-plus year reign, and they live and die on this kid. Okay, little Alexei's got a problem, though. He's got hemophilia. His blood doesn't clot. And the reason it doesn't clot is because, let's be frank, this kid is the product of centuries of inbreeding. And that happens a lot with inbreeding, is hemophilia. So their biggest worry is that this kid in some way gets injured, right? Like you and I might, cut ourselves. Here's a pair of scissors. Not that you would do that, but maybe you cut yourself by mistake and then you can't stop bleeding and you die. So their mind is all about this kid, okay? Ways in which Russia's problems were exacerbated by World War I. Here we go. Number one, the Russians are industrially behind. And that's not going to get any better under the pressure of a war, right? There's some logic that thinks maybe a war will take our mind off of our domestic problems. It'll take away a lot of the strain, not the Russians. We've looked at these charts across the course of the last 100 years, and the Russians are way back. And they're fighting against a Germany that is far more industrially advanced than they are. And it just means that if you're Russia, you're going to have more problems. You're going to have greater chances of starvation, not just in the cities and in Russia itself, but out there on the front lines of the war. Oh, it is going to be a pain, ladies and gentlemen, a real problem maker. Number two, higher casualties. Let's be frank. The Russians, unfortunately, are just dying more often, and that's a lot to do with their technology, or lack of it. It's a lot to do with the fact that the Russians don't have a great deal to offer when it comes to how do I fight this war. The Russians are going to do their best, but at the end of the day, they are sending boys and men off to the slaughter. And the people at home are sending their food up to the front of the war, and unfortunately, they're not getting as much food, and there's great unrest. Now, Nicholas II is supposed to be solving this problem, and maybe it's too much to ask for any one person to solve, but Nicholas is going to do everything that he can do to solve this puppy, and man, he's going to try. But let's be fair about it. He just doesn't have the tools. Not himself mentally, and the country either. He's going to go to the front of the war. That's right, to the front of it. Why, you ask? Well, Nicholas has this idea that when he rides out there on his horse, and he gets to the front, that the people of the front, the soldiers out there, are going to see him and be like, oh, the Tsar has arrived. Our salvation is here. We will now fight better. Nicholas thinks that when he arrives at the front, the troops will somehow be emboldened to action, and they will fight, and they will not let Russia lose. Okay, that's not a bad idea, I suppose, but here's what really happens. Unfortunately, Nicholas goes to the front. This is an absolute monarchy. This is a country where all of the decisions are made by one person, and suddenly the main city, the capital city, is left in the hands of the wife of the Tsar, the Tsarina, who's from where again? Oh, that's right, Germany, the opposing, country, and a group of advisors, and no one quite knows what's going on. The power vacuum there is horrible. Nicholas has already really lost any kind of faith among the people. You remember Bloody Sunday in 1905 when he opened fire on the people. You remember the fact that he had that Duma, that advisory group that frankly he's been ignoring now for almost 10 years. And if you're Nicholas, you don't have a lot going here. You really haven't got the faith of the Russian people. The only thing that works for you is the army at home to keep order. If you lose that, it's over. You've been ruling by strong arm for the last decade, and unfortunately the war is going to pull that to tatters, and you are eventually going to find yourself in a much, much worse situation. If I'm a Russian person in 1917, the Tsar isn't answering the key issues of life. He's not finding me food, he's not bringing me any kind of hope, and unfortunately he's off at the front trying to control a war that he really can't control. That's the sad part. Here's what I want you to do, folks. I want you in your packets, I'm gonna flip. Sorry to make noise on the video here, but here we go, flipping. I want you to flip to the article on trench warfare, okay, that occurs back here on page 1 of the written numbers. There's the one there, okay? You're going to pick up where it says the changing nature of war, the changing nature of war, and you're going to read through page 1 and 2. I want you to read basically to the end where it says war in the air and the sea. I'm going to put an assignment on Google Classroom that's based on your reading of that. Okay, so please do that reading, and then the assignment on Google Classroom that I'll put on there is based on that. I hope you're doing well. Listen, I'm open to suggestions. If this isn't working for you, let me know what I should be doing differently. Otherwise, I hope you're well. I hope you're safe. Good luck with your last day of school there tomorrow, and get home, be with your loved ones, hug some people, and take care of yourselves.